Hello, everyone. Welcome. We will give folks one more minute here to get logged on, then we'll go ahead and get started. But thanks to all of you for joining us this afternoon for our Farm to School and Early Care Grant information session. For those of you who have joined already, you can go ahead and if you can just make sure that you're muted, that would be great, just to prevent any background noise. And we will go ahead and get started. All right, well, welcome everyone to the Minnesota Department of Agriculture's First Bite and Full Tray Farm to School Grant Information Session. We're really glad that you are all here this afternoon joining us to talk about our grants. Before we get started, just want to provide notice that we are recording this session and we will be posting the recording on the Minnesota Department of Agriculture's website for you and others to review. So your participation this afternoon is voluntary. So you are welcome to ask questions or provide comments in the chat, but you are not legally required to contribute or actively participate in any way. And we want to note that we are legally required to provide a copy of this recording to any third party who requests it. At this time, we invite you to introduce yourself in the chat if you'd like to. You can share your name, your school or early care center or organization that you may be affiliated with, and then let us know where you're calling in from around the state. While you're doing that, the Minnesota Department of Agriculture staff will introduce themselves. So my name is Kate Siebold. I'm the Farm to Institution Coordinator at the Minnesota Department of Agriculture, or MDA, as you'll hear it called today. And I'm calling in from Northfield, Minnesota. And my role at the Department of Agriculture is kind of all things institutional market development for local food. So a big part of that work is farm to school and early care. So helping to get more local foods into institutional settings like schools and early cares. And one of my favorite parts of my job is getting to work with our farm to school and early care grantees with technical support, helping them connect with farmers, helping them connect with resources and trainings, and providing one-on-one support. And I will pass it next to Emily to introduce herself.
Thanks, Kate. Hi, everyone. Emily Mayer. I manage our farm to school and early care grants at the Minnesota Department of Agriculture. I also manage our urban agriculture grant program. So if you have any questions about that at any time, feel free to reach out, but I'm happy to be here to share more about our farm to school and early care grants. Michaela?
Yeah, thanks, Emily. I'm Michaela Tadini. I am the MDA's Farm to Institution Specialist, calling in today from St. Paul. So I work on pretty similar things to Kate and Emily. I work on some different farm to school and school garden projects, and then also help out with the farm to school grants and urban ag grants. So I, just do a little bit of everything.
Great. And it looks like we have folks calling in from all over the state. I'm seeing Faribault, Bemidji, Hastings, Benson areas, West St. Paul. So Barnesville, Appleton, thank you all for joining us this afternoon. It's great. And we're going to keep moving here on our presentation. So the plan for this afternoon is to just kind of introduce you to the farm to school and early care grant programs that the MDA administers. We'll spend the bulk of our time digging into some of the details for the fiscal year 2026 grants that are open right now, including what we're looking for in grant projects, eligible expenses, and how to apply. We'll also highlight some resources and support that is available to all of you as you're working on your proposals. And then we'll have time at the end for some questions. So I know we have some familiar faces here this afternoon, current or past grantees, but also some new faces, which is exciting. And so just to kind of introduce our Farm to School and Early Care Grant Program. This, again, is administered by the Minnesota Department of Agriculture. Our grant program is state funded, and it's housed under our Agricultural Growth Research and Innovation Program, called AGRI for short. And the Farm to School and Early Care grants specifically are designed to increase the amount of Minnesota grown and raised foods that are used in school and early care nutrition programs. And by doing so, expand market opportunities for Minnesota farmers. So we have a few different funding opportunities. Today, we're going to be talking about the funding opportunities that are available for K-12 schools and districts and early childhood education centers. That includes our first bite grant and our full tray grant, as well as our equipment grant. So we will dive into the details for all of that here next. We also want to mention that we do have a local TOTS cost share program for family childcare providers. We won't be talking about the details of that today, but we are hosting an information session on Thursday, September 18th for the local TOTS cost share. So if you know any family childcare providers that may be interested, encourage them to attend that information session or visit our website, and there's more information on there as well. With that, we're going to jump into the details for this year's 2026 funding, and I will pass it to Michaela.
Yeah, thanks, Kate. You can go to the next slide. Yeah, so just an overview of our fiscal year 26 grants. We have approximately $1.35 million available this year. And the timeline for these grants, so the time frame that you have to use money if you're awarded grant money, will be from spring 2026 to December 2028. The deadline to apply for all of the grants that we're going to talk about today is Thursday, October 23rd at 4 p.m. So make sure that that date is marked off on your calendars. And these funds can be used to purchase Minnesota grown and raised food and also equipment. So we'll get into the different grants that are available next. So there are 3 grants that we're going to talk about today, or 3 grant options that we'll talk about today. 2 of which are for food, and then 1 is for equipment. So within the food grants, we have our First Bite grant, which is designed for schools and early care centers that are newer to farm to school. So it's really a grant that's meant to be like a learning opportunity to dip your toes into farm to school purchases and try things out. So the amount that you can apply for is between $2,500 up to $5,000. And there's no match requirement for these grants. So if you purchase $5,000 of local apples, the MDA would reimburse you for the full $5,000. And something important to note about the First Bite grants is that you're only eligible to receive these grants one time. So if you have applied for and received a First Bite grant in previous years, you are not eligible to receive another one.
I still got to take advantage of
And next I'll talk about our full tray grants. So this is sort of the next level of food grants offered by the MDA. So these are for schools and ECE centers that have some farm to school experience, or designed for schools and ECE centers with a little bit more experience. You can apply for up to $35,000. The amount that you're eligible to apply for is calculated using a special formula, which we'll get to later in the presentation. And these grants do have a one-to-one match requirement. So what that means is if you purchased $5,000 of local apples and submitted that to the MDA, you would be reimbursed for $2,500. So sort of every dollar that you're reimbursed, you're also expected to match with a dollar of sort of your own funding. And then the third grant type is our equipment grants. You'll see that it says additional funding. Additional is italicized. This is additional funding for equipment, meaning that to be eligible to receive an equipment grant, you must also receive either a First Bite or a full tray grant. So you can't apply for and receive just an equipment grant. You need to also have received one of the other 2 grants. You can apply for up to $25,000 of equipment grants, and these grants, similar to the full tray grant, do have a one-to-one match requirement. Next slide. Okay, so diving a little bit deeper into First Bite grants. Like I said, these are designed for schools and early care centers that have little or no farm to early care or farm to school and early care experience. So really like a learning opportunity. The application is a little bit more streamlined, just to help you like dive into the world of farm to school in maybe a less intimidating way. You can apply for, like I said before, between $2,500 up to $5,000 per school district or ECE center, and there is no match requirement. Like I said, also on the previous slide, probably the most important thing to keep in mind is that you're only eligible to receive a First Bite grant one time. And within these grants, we really want to have a focus on intentional and high impact farm to school and early care efforts. So thinking about introducing new items, using this grant as an opportunity to sort of explore farm to school. And in line with having this be a little bit more of a seamless or streamlined experience for folks who are maybe new to farm to school or newer to state grants, there are not letters of support required. I believe you can still submit one or submit some if you want, but they're not a requirement for First Bite grants. All right, and then our full tray grants. So a lot of folks who apply for full tray grants maybe received a First Bite grant previously, or you can just jump right into applying for a full tray grant right away if that's what you'd like to do. But they are designed for schools and early cares with a little bit more farm to school experience. And they have a focus on enabling new or expanded farm to school purchases. So not just sustaining efforts that maybe you're already doing, but thinking about how can I add something new to my menu? How can I feature local food more often? How can I feature local food for a wider age range? So really expanding on the farm to school work that a lot of you are probably already doing. You can apply for up to $35,000. The amount that you're eligible to apply for is calculated using this formula where you multiply the number of reimbursable meals served in October 2024 by 10 cents and then times 12 months. And then whatever that number is the maximum amount of funding that you're eligible to apply for, up to $35,000. These grants do have that one-to-one match requirement. So you're sort of expected to spend, for every dollar that you're reimbursed by the MDA, you're spending a dollar of your own funds as well. And these grants do have letters of support requirement. So you'll need a letter from at least one producer who will benefit from your farm to school project. Optionally, you can have letters from additional producers. And also, if you're working with a food distributor, you'll need a letter from them stating which local farms they work with. And then optionally, you can have letters of community partners, so up to 2 of those community support letters. And then I saw a question in the chat. I don't know if we want to pause for questions or if we want to wait until the end to do questions.
Great question. Let's save questions for the end and we can jump into all of them. And I forgot to mention that earlier on. You are welcome to put questions in the chat, or there's a Q&A feature. You can put them both places. We will be keeping track of those throughout this webinar, and then we'll answer all of them at the end.
Okay, sounds good. So keep submitting your questions and we will get to them at the end of the presentation. So if your organization or business is a multi-site early care center, so you're operating multiple different sites, you'll want to submit just one application on behalf of all of those locations. So if you're applying for a First Bite grant, you're still capped at that $5,000 maximum award. You'll just submit one application on behalf of all of the locations that you oversee. And similarly for the full trade grant, even if you have multiple sites, you're still eligible for up to $35,000 or whatever your result is based on the equation that we went over on the previous slide. So if your business or organization has multiple sites, feel free to reach out to any of us who are on this presentation today before you submit your application or before you start your application, just to make sure that you know what you're supposed to be doing and are able to get through that process as easily as you can. So And then finally, the equipment grant. Like I said, this is in addition to a first bite or full trade grant, so you will need to apply for and receive one of those grants first before being eligible to receive additional money for equipment. This is up to $25,000 that you can apply for, and there is that one-to-one match requirement. So keep that in mind when you're thinking about equipment that you might be interested in. And there's a ton of different equipment that's eligible to be purchased with these grant funds. Almost anything to help you buy, prepare, and serve more Minnesota grown and raised foods. So that could be like refrigeration, freezers, robo-coos, tilt skillets, proofing cabinets. I think someone last year bought like a vacuum sealer. So it's really almost anything you can think of, as long as it helps you buy and serve more local food. All right, and then I'm just going to go over some examples of grant projects and some that have been funded previously. So I've already mentioned this a little bit before, but projects must start or expand sourcing of Minnesota grown and raised foods. So not just sustaining existing efforts, but thinking about trying new things out, bringing things to a wider age range or wider audience, or featuring them more often. So some examples might be trialing new Minnesota grown products on the menu or through taste tests, participating in the Minnesota Great Apple Crunch, so buying local apples for your students to crunch, hosting a breakfast or lunch with the farmer meal, increasing the number of times a Minnesota item or meal repeats on the menu, adding Minnesota Thursday as a monthly feature to the menu, expanding featured items or meals during Farm to Kids Month, which is in October, so it's coming up if you weren't already aware of that, or incorporating local foods into summer meal programs. So just thinking about ways that you can highlight or start procuring different foods or featuring foods more often, or both. And priority will be placed on applicants that plan to buy a wide range of agricultural products, including culturally relevant foods, which might be things like bison or wild rice, or some different culturally relevant vegetables, specialty crops, so like fruits, vegetables, herbs, maple syrup, honey, just a wide range of things. And applicants are also encouraged to procure foods from a variety of producers and sources. So working with farmers directly, working with emerging farmers, going to farmers markets, working with food hubs, basically working with a wide range of folks, and with those folks trying to procure a wide range of items will be given a priority. And some specific examples of past projects include adding more local vegetables to salad bars, buying local grains or flour for the first time, adding culturally relevant foods like bison or wild rice to menus, sourcing local honey and maple syrup, or buying cheese from a small nearby business. So all of these are different farm to school projects that are eligible and have been funded by these grants. All right, so with that, I'll pass it off to Emily to talk about eligible foods.
Okay, thanks, Michaela. All right, so eligible food items for this grant. You can use funds to purchase both unprocessed or processed local food items. So unprocessed or minimally processed foods are whole foods that were grown or raised in Minnesota. Processed foods include items that were made in Minnesota with at least one ingredient. The primary ingredient has to be at least 80% grown or raised in Minnesota. And then these foods must be used as a part of one of the federal meal programs. So National School Lunch Program, School Breakfast Program, Summer Food Service Program, or the Adult and Child Food Program, also known as CACFP. I'm sure you're all familiar with those acronyms, but next slide. All right, so for purposes of this grant, the definition of Minnesota grown or raised is at least 80% of the product was produced, so that's grown, raised, and or harvested in Minnesota. One thing to note is that in Minnesota, we have a lot of food companies that are based in Minnesota. but they might not necessarily be sourcing their ingredients from Minnesota. So if you are planning to purchase items from a Minnesota food company, please just double check that their ingredients are coming from Minnesota as well. It's the grantee's responsibility to confirm with that food company that the foods are grown or raised and are eligible for this grant. But if you have questions about that, you can always reach out to anybody on the MDA team, and we're happy to help you walk through that process. But something to have on your radar. Some examples of eligible food items would be fruits or vegetables, meat, fish and poultry, a variety of dairy products, with the exception of fluid milk, eggs, grains, and sweeteners such as honey or maple syrup. All of those items would be eligible with these grant funds. And some examples of processed foods that would be eligible would include hot dogs, tofu, bread, tortillas, pre-made smoothies, granola, with the reminder that at least 80% of the primary ingredient would have to be grown or raised in Minnesota. So on this slide here, you see that there's a hot dog on there. That hot dog would have to have at least 80% of the beef or meat sourced from a Minnesota farm or farmers. So ineligible expenses, kind of high level for this grant. Fluid milk, like I had mentioned, a lot of milk already served in Minnesota schools and early cares is local from Minnesota, so that is not an eligible item for these funds. Produce that was grown in a home garden, a school garden, or a college or university garden or farm is not eligible. Items grown or produced in a state other than Minnesota. So that's something to be aware of if you are kind of in a bordering community. Make sure that the food items are coming from Minnesota and not a bordering state. Items bought for any meal or snack program that's outside of those federal programs that I had mentioned earlier. Processed food products that do not contain a primary ingredient grown or raised in Minnesota is not eligible. Something else that we often get questions about is seeds for starting plants that you might grow in the school garden, actual plants or seedlings, and then other garden equipment. Those are not eligible for this grant. But if you're looking for funding for that, reach out, and there might be a different opportunity that we could connect you with. And then another item that's not eligible is staff time for the procurement of local foods, food preparation, the staff time that it takes to prepare these foods, and then other related farm to school or early care planning or activities. One question that we get asked frequently is, where do I buy local foods? If you're brand new to farm to school, it's a really great question. As a grantee, you can choose where to purchase local food items from and how you want to purchase those. Some examples of where previous grantees have purchased direct from a farmer or producer, from a food hub or aggregator, a distributor. A farmer's market is a really great resource, or else even like a retail store, like a grocery store or butcher shop that's located in your town. If you are purchasing from a retail location, just again, make sure that they're Minnesota items and not items from outside of the state. But if you look at the graphic on the screen there, that's just a quick little snapshot of our 2023 grantees, where they were purchasing their items and using their grant funds. 63% were purchasing direct from farmers, 24% were purchasing through wholesale channels, and 13% from food hubs. And Kate later will share some resources for how you can connect with different growers and producers. Here's another snapshot from our 2023 grantees, just kind of a quick little showcase of where people are using their grant funds. So the top 3 items in 2023 that were, items that were purchased using 2023 grant funds, beef, apples, and lettuce. So proteins, fruits, and vegetables are really easy items to incorporate into your school or early care menus. But there's also other products dairy products, sugars, grains. Those are items that you can also kind of get creative with. So here's a little bit of a different snapshot of some of our 2023 purchases focusing on vegetables. So you can see that lettuce is a really quick, easy way to incorporate local items into your school or early cares menu. Carrots and tomatoes were also big contenders for these grant funds. But as you look down that list, just kind of take a peek and get creative. And, how could you use mushrooms in your school menu? Or where could you source broccoli from that's local that would fall within the parameters of this grant? So lots of different types of foods that are grown in Minnesota, and we're happy to help you locate those foods and give you tips and pointers. And then this is just a snapshot of our 2023 grant funds focusing on protein. So beef kind of ran away with the top prize there. Lots of great beef producers in our state, but again, get creative. There's lots of other sources of protein that can be locally sourced: turkey, pork, bison, chicken, eggs. Lots of great producers, and you don't need to buy from specific or approved farmers or vendors. You can purchase from anybody so long as the product is grown or raised in Minnesota. All right, now we're going to shift gears a little bit and talk about the reimbursement process. So all of these grant funds are paid on a reimbursement basis. So that means that you're going to spend the money upfront on your end, and then you're going to submit documentation to the MDA, and we're going to reimburse you for what your expenses were. So the documentation that will need to be submitted, you'll send it in via email to me. You will need to fill out a reimbursement worksheet, which we will provide, and that will include the items that you're requesting reimbursement for, the date of purchase, the cost of those items, as well as the farm name and location. You'll also have to send in your proof of purchase for each eligible item. So that's a receipt or an invoice that shows the item that you purchased. And then the proof of payment is a canceled check, a credit card statement, or a receipt, something that shows that the vendor was paid for the items that you bought. One thing to note is that source identification is required for these grant funds. So that is the farm name and location. So for items that are purchased through a distributor or at a farmer's market, make sure to collect that source identification information at the time of purchase. It's a lot easier to get it upfront than to have to go back when you're ready to request your reimbursement. And then for processed products, recipients may also need to submit an attestation form that they meet the 80% Minnesota grown requirement. So like we had mentioned earlier, it's really great to just connect with the company that you're purchasing from to make sure that they meet that 80% Minnesota grown or raised requirement. And how to apply? This is a really great question. So you're going to fill out your application using the MDA's online application system. It's a program called Foundant. There's a link for it on our grant webpage. So if you're looking to find the link, go to our website. If you're a new user, you'll need to create an account before you can start filling out the application. But once you're logged in, you'll search for fiscal year 26 first bite or fiscal year 26 full tray, and then click the apply button. This is a system for all of our grants through the MDA, so just make sure you're applying for the correct program when you log in. And as Michaela mentioned earlier, all applications are due by 4 p.m. on Thursday, October 23rd. So something to keep on your calendar, and I always encourage people to submit early. Put October 22nd on your calendar just so you're not crunched at the last minute, because it's not a good feeling to have to get it in by the deadline. So. And then just a quick note, if you are a CACFP sponsor, CACFP sponsors may apply on behalf of eligible early care centers. Sponsor organizations may only include one center per application, but they may submit multiple applications on behalf of multiple ECE centers. So a little confusing. If you have questions about that as a CACFP sponsor, please reach out and we're happy to help you walk through that process. But for the application, the ECE center must be named in the application, and the application must have a letter of support from that center that says that they're a part of this, they want to be a grantee, and they would like to receive these funds. So this applies for both First Bite and Full Tray grants. So just something to be aware of if you are a CACFP sponsor.
All right, I will take it over from here then. So we just want to share some resources and support that are available to you as you're thinking about and working on your grant proposals. So first off, how to prepare. First, if you haven't already, we encourage you to go online and read the full request for proposal, or RFP, for the First Bite or Full Tray grant, depending on which one you're considering applying for. There's a ton of information in that, so it can be perhaps a little overwhelming when you first open it up, but just take some time, read through it. You'll find probably that some of your questions can be answered right then and there. And then just start to think about, what are the local food items that you're interested in sourcing? Michaela shared a few examples of what grant projects look like. And there's lots of options of the types of local food that you can buy. And it's up to you to think about, what sounds most exciting, or perhaps what feels like the best fit for your district based on your staffing, or where you're located, or the types of equipment you have, or the types of farmers in your area. Once you have some ideas, start to think about that work plan. So what are the steps involved? Who's going to be involved, connecting with farmers, placing the orders, what are you looking to buy? How will you be serving it? When would you be serving it? And just start to kind of think through those details, especially if you're a full tray applicant. That work plan will be an important part of your proposal. And then once you have an idea of kind of what you're looking to do and what you're looking to buy, you can start reaching out to farmers or developing a plan for how you will be connecting with farmers to source those items. And then we encourage you to also, think beyond just the buying of the local things, but how will you be serving it? And then also, how will you be promoting it? How will you be getting your staff and your students excited about it? We have some great resources at Department of Ag that can help you with promotion, like our Minnesota Harvest of the Month program. We have free posters and salad bar clings. There's the Minnesota Grown program that has some resources. So think about what might be helpful for you, and ways that you want to promote those items when you're serving them in your lunchroom. The Minnesota Farm to Kids Alliance offers monthly Farm to Kids office hours. These will be happening throughout the school year on the second Wednesday of each month from 2:30 to 3:30. And these office hours are open to anyone who's interested in joining. They're a great space to connect, learn, and ask questions about farm to school and early care. This year, for those who have attended in the past, we do have a little bit of a different format, where each month we have a theme, where we have like a mini presentation or kind of like educational spotlight. And then from there, conversation can go wherever participants are interested, and you can ask any questions on your mind. The October office hours on October 8th are going to be dedicated to grant application support. So our partners at the Institute for Agriculture and Trade Policy will be facilitating those office hour sessions. They're very familiar with grants. They've done a lot of evaluation on our grants. So the graphs that Emily shared earlier was all done by Institute for Agriculture and Trade Policy. So they're really familiar with the grant structure and just kind of, what can be helpful as you're working through those grant proposals. So I encourage you to join for those office hours if you're looking for some support. The QR code here on the screen, you can scan that to join the Zoom session. You register once, and then it'll send you a link that you can use each month, and just join as you're able. Again, October 8th from 2:30 to 3:30 will be specifically all about grant support. We also want to mention the Minnesota Grown Wholesale Directory. So Emily mentioned that, it is up to grantees to choose the farms or businesses that they want to buy their Minnesota grown and raised foods from. And the Minnesota Grown Wholesale Directory can be a great starting point to find producers in your area. So if you go to the Minnesota Grown website, minnesotagrown.com, at the top of the screen, you're going to see a reefer truck symbol for the wholesale directory. And that directory has farmers who are specifically interested in selling to wholesale customers like schools or early care centers. And you can search that database and map by item, or you can just look at the map for your area and find producers near you who are selling items that you're interested in. There's also a bunch of filters. So based on the item or the type of farmer you're looking to work with, the wholesale directory can help you find them. And then I also want to mention that there's some new additional support in our state. The Renewing the Countryside now has 5 new regional coordinators supporting with local food purchasing and the marketing of local foods. So this project is supported by funding from the USDA Patrick Leahy Farm to School program that the Minnesota Department of Education received, and they're partnering with Renewing the Countryside to offer this network of support. So the regional local food coordinators can provide one-on-one support to schools or farmers. They will be organizing educational events in their region, and they're just a great person to reach out to for local connections and resources. So of course, Department of Agriculture, we are here to help for grantees and anyone who's looking to buy local, but these regional local food coordinators can be another great resource in your region who might have great regional connections. And they are also available in helping and connecting with schools or early care centers as they're thinking about their grants. So Renewing the Countryside's website has all the details. You can see the regional leads here for your region. And we encourage you to reach out to them if you're looking for additional support as well. All right, so with that, we're going to do Q&A right now. So we have some questions that have already been put into the chat and in the question and answer section. So we'll start there. But if you have more questions, please continue to add them to the chat or Q&A. You can also raise your hand if you'd prefer to ask your question out loud. So to start with, there's a question that is asking if they can add their ECE or CACFP reimbursable meal counts to their K-6 school nutrition program reimbursable meal counts to calculate what they can request for the full tray application. So Emily, I'll maybe see if you want to weigh in on this first, combining K through 6 and early care meals. Is that allowable?
Yep. So that is allowable. I was just pulling up the link for the RFP for the full tray bite, which I'll put in the chat, but on page 5 of the RFP, I believe. Well, page 2, if you go by the numbers on the actual RFP. If you look at that, there are examples of each, how to do that if you're just a K-12 school or school district, if you're only an early care center, or if you're a school district that has an ECE program. It kind of lays it out step by step. So I'll put the link for that in the chat. Once you've reviewed that, reach out if you have additional questions. But yes, you can combine those numbers.
Great. Okay. Next question. If we wanted to purchase meat from a local farmer, is that okay? It would be a home farm, and we would then have it processed at an actual butcher shop. I can take a first pass at this question. So yes, you can purchase products directly from a farmer. For meat, in this instance, if you're going to have the meat processed, you will want to check to see if the butcher shop where the meat would be processed is USDA or Minnesota Equal to inspected. So in addition to our grant requirements, where the product needs to be grown or raised in Minnesota. This food, since it's being served as part of a federal meal program, whether that's CACFP, school breakfast, school lunch program, you grantees would still need to follow federal meal requirements that are set at the USDA level and supported and coordinated through Minnesota Department of Education. So in the instance of meat, for meat to be served in one of those federal meal programs, it needs to be either USDA inspected or Minnesota Equal to inspected. And if you're looking for a processor that has one of those two inspection statuses, the Minnesota Department of Agriculture's website does have a list of those producers who have one of those two inspections. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to myself, or Jamie Anderson at the Minnesota Department of Education can also be a resource in kind of navigating the federal meal requirements kind of beyond just the scope of this grant. All right, let's see here. Next question. Another question about eggs, and can we purchase those from a home farm? So same situation with eggs is, in addition to those eggs being grown or raised, or in this case, raised in Minnesota, you need to make sure that you're following requirements for the federal meal programs. There is a whole fact sheet actually on eggs, and specifically if you are serving them to children under the age of 4, I believe, or in an early care setting, there are some specific requirements about eggs. So we can send out an email to everyone who registered for this grant afterwards and include a link for that resource. But you would want to make sure that you're following any federal meal requirements around eggs in addition to grant requirements. All right, let's see. Next question. You said that produce cannot be from a home, but can be bought from a farmer's market. A lot of produce sold at farmers markets are homegrown vegetables. So what is the difference? So produce can be purchased directly from a farmer. I think the note about a home garden was in reference to for like an early care center or a school. If you have your own garden there, we cannot reimburse for the produce that you are growing yourself, but you can directly purchase produce from a farmer. Emily, anything you want to add to that?
Nope, that's good. Thanks.
Do the grants need to include only new products that you have not used before, or could they be both new items and other Minnesota products we've featured and continue to feature? Emily, do you want to weigh in on that one?
Yep, I can take that. So it can be, if you're a full tray applicant, we encourage you to sort of build on your previous purchases, your previous farm to school work. So that would hopefully be new items that you're purchasing, or new producers or growers or vendors that you're purchasing from. But your application can certainly include some of those local items that you've purchased in the past as well. But for full tray, priority will be given to those who are expanding and sort of moving above and beyond where their current level of farm to school or early care programming is at.
Thanks, Emily. We had a couple questions around determining how much full tray applicants can request, and specifically wondering about the equation with reimbursable meals. Is that both breakfast and lunch, just breakfast?
Yep, so that would be both breakfast and lunch would count towards that. So it's the meals served as a part of the federal meal program, school lunch program, or school breakfast program. And I'll put the chat, or in the chat, I'll throw in the link to the RFP where it does have examples of like, how do you count the number of meals and how do you figure out that equation and that eligibility amount? So I'll put that in the chat now.
There was a question around the use of products for the summer program and reference to a previous grant where it couldn't be used for a summer program. For this grant that's state funded, funds can be used for the summer meal program. There was a previous round of grants that this person may be referencing where we received federal funds and it couldn't be used for summer meal program. But for fiscal year 2026, grant funds can be used to buy local for summer meal programs. All right. Question, do you have to be nonprofit and participate in CACFP to apply for a grant? Want to take that one, Emily?
No, so you don't need to have nonprofit status, but you do need to be actively enrolled in the CACFP food program. So if you have further questions, feel free to reach out. I don't know if you have anything additional, Kate, that you'd like to add.
No, nothing additional. There's a question if special preference is given to schools with higher free and reduced numbers. No, there is not a specific preference for that.
Yeah, I'll just add that we don't, that's not a part of the application process, the free and reduced numbers. So that's sort of a totally separate federal program that we don't take into account for this application.
There was a question around community partners, which we referenced in regards to letters of support. So some examples of community partners that a school or an early childhood education center may be working with could be a regional SHIP coordinator, so statewide health improvement partnership through Department of Health. SHIP coordinators sometimes partner with schools or early care centers on education or different efforts. So perhaps you're working with a SHIP coordinator or a nonprofit in your area, a food hub, a regional development commission. There might just be different instances for some of you where you have partnerships established with an entity in your region that you think could be a good fit for providing a letter of support. So if you have any other questions on community partners, feel free to reach out and we can talk more. There was a question around the equipment grant and whether if you've received a First Bite grant in the past, if that makes you eligible for the equipment grant or if you'd need to wait for next year. I think this is referencing, if they need to apply for another grant, a food grant again this year, and the answer would be yes. So if you want to request equipment funds, apply for an equipment grant for fiscal year 26, you would also need to apply for one of the food grants, which would be the First Bite grant or the full tray grant. So in the instance of you've received a First Bite grant in the past, you would then be looking to apply for a full tray grant, and then you would apply for an equipment grant alongside that. Just want to make sure we're getting everything. There's a question on buying bread from an individual that has a cottage foods license. Very similar to discussion around eggs is in addition to buying bread that's using Minnesota grown and raised ingredients like flour, for instance, you need to continue to follow requirements for the federal meal programs. For the example of bread with a cottage food producer, I don't believe that would be an eligible vendor to be purchasing from for a federal meal program, but I'm not positive. So we can get information for that. But again, Department of Education could also be a resource. A question on where folks are getting lettuce from. So this is a great opportunity to use the Minnesota Grown Wholesale Directory. You can search for lettuce or greens and find producers near you. But there is lots of lettuce grown around the state. Outdoors, we also have some indoor hydroponic lettuce facilities in Minnesota. So a real mix of where we've seen past grantees purchasing lettuce from, but I'd encourage you to check out the wholesale directory as a starting point. All right, a question regarding producers and if they have to be USDA approved. So again, in the instance for meat, it would need to be either a USDA or Minnesota Equal to inspected facility where the product is being processed. Emily, there's a question on letters of support. How detailed do letters from producers need to be?
That's a great question. We have a resource on our webpage that talks about it's a template that you could use when you're connecting with growers. Kind of tips for what to include in that letter of support. I'll put that link in the chat as well. You don't have to follow this template by any means, but it's kind of a good starting point. But you basically want to just have the producer say like that their business name and their location, so we can see that they're a Minnesota producer, and then just sort of describing how they're supportive of the applicant's farm to school or early care goals. So how will the food that they're going to provide help the applicant serve more locally grown foods, and then if there's any other like community events or something that they're going to like help out with or be a part of, like just to show the farm to school impact within the community. So I will throw that link in the chat here, so you can take a peek at that and let us know if you have questions.
And the next question, Emily, is if donated items can count towards a grantee's match.
Yeah, so unfortunately, donated items or in-kind, those items would not be eligible to count for the match. So we're really looking for that dollar to dollar. So like Michaela mentioned, if you have an award for $2,000, we'll have to see that you spent $4,000 on eligible Minnesota grown or raised food items in order to get that full $2,000 award amount. Yeah.
A question on a school or center that runs both National School Lunch Program and CACFP, can they apply for 2 grants?
So in this scenario, you would apply as you would submit one application, but you would be able to use both your school and your CACFP meals served numbers as a part of your formula to determine the amount that you're eligible for. So we can only award one grant to each, individual school or school district or early care. So we wouldn't be able to have, an early care and a school contract. We would need those combined.
Next question is around timing for the grant. So if the grant application deadline is October 23rd, when would the grants be approved?
That's a great question also. So we're hoping to have award letters out by, I believe, let me just double check. I think it's like late January. Things shifted a little bit this year. So you would know if you have funds by the end of January. And then you would be able to start spending those funds in spring of 2026. But there's a more detailed timeline in the RFP. So take a look at that.
Great. All right. And then there's a question regarding, it looks like a text from the RFP for early childhood education centers and the funding formula, noting, kind of looking for an explanation for the example given, why the applicant can request $3,240 to $5,000.
Yes. So for full trade grants, the minimum amount that you can request is $5,000. And in this scenario that they snipped, that's in the chat, based off of meals served, that applicant would only be eligible for 32, but because the minimum amount for a full trade grant is $5,000, the applicant could request, they're sort of in that gray area. So they could request up to $5,000 if they think they could spend it.
All right. And then next question, if we are awarded a grant and are unable to match the full amount of the grant award, would we still be able to get reimbursed up to the amount we were able to match?
Yeah, so I think in that scenario, I would encourage you to only apply for what you think you can actually spend. So if you figure out the equation and it says you're eligible for 20,000, but you think you could only spend 10,000, you can certainly only request 10,000. And then as far as the match goes, when you're submitting your items for reimbursement, we will reimburse 50% of what is eligible that's been submitted. So if your award is 10,000 and you only submit, 8,000 in eligible expenses, we would technically reimburse 50% of that. So it's a little convoluted. Let me know if you have questions.
And then there's a question saying that they're assuming that the match needs to be Minnesota grown as well, and that is correct.
It would need to be eligible items that we had discussed earlier in the presentation.
All right. If I've done an adequate job tracking questions, I believe we have answered all of them. But now is the time, if you submitted a question and we didn't get an answer to you, if you could throw it in the chat or Q&A one more time or raise your hand, we will make sure to do that. Or if there's anything else on your mind that's come up, we have a few more minutes for additional questions. Right. I'm not seeing any come in. So with that, we will say thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. And this is our contact information. Again, please reach out if you have any questions. And a quick plug that October, which is right around the corner, is Farm to Kids Month. So this is a QR code to get more information, but we encourage you to celebrate however you'd like in celebrating local food and farmers in your schools and early care centers. This is the theme, Harvesting Creativity, this year. So we're encouraging schools and early cares to celebrate local food and farmers through creative storytelling, literacy, and art. There are some examples online of what that might look like. And October 9th is our annual Minnesota Great Apple Crunch. So if you're planning to crunch into local apples, please make sure to register so you're a part of our crunch numbers. There's always a little friendly competition that happens among the Great Lakes states. And perhaps this year Minnesota can beat Michigan because they always seem to have a few more crunchers than us. But anyways, register your crunch. Find out more information about Farm to Kids Month and enjoy the celebrations. So thank you so much and have a great afternoon, everyone. And Janine, if you're on, yes, you can use donated apples for the Great Apple Crunch. Oh, Denise, I see your question. Your hand is raised if you want to unmute. All right, I see. Oh, let's see. Do I need to unmute you? Denise, are you able to unmute, or Rose?
Oh, yes, I can unmute.
Okay.
Can you guys hear me?
Rose.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I have to put my camera on, and I apologize. I came in later for the session because I had to be in class today. And I know I talked to Emily and I would probably email each other, but I am completely new in this whole food program. And a couple questions. I know I just need to have a link how to apply for it. I'm pretty sure you probably have sent it, Emily. And second, is there like a income limitation? But that's what I meant to say. Does it have to be only families who are in scholarships or anything like that to be part of this, to apply for this food program? Thank you for the link.
Great questions. Yeah, so Emily put the link in the chat. And then eligibility for this grant is participation in either the National School Lunch Program, if you're with a school, or participation in the Child and Adult Care Food Program if you're an early care center. There's no requirement around like the families that you're serving, or your free and reduced, numbers, for instance. So as long as you're located in the state and you're actively participating in one of the federal meal programs, then you would be eligible to apply.
Okay. that was the question I actually wanted to ask. So I am, like I said, I'm fully new of this, but I don't think that I am part of any food program. So is there a place I need to apply to be part of that? And is there a also eligibility to be part of that food program? We are a licensed, early childhood daycare. So that's that. Yeah.
Yeah. Great question. So the federal meal programs, so for instance, if you're an early childhood education center, that would be the Child and Adult Care Food Program. That is a program administered, it's a federal program, but it's administered by the Minnesota Department of Education. And so they would be the best resource for providing information with you about the process for enrolling in that federal meal program. So I will put my email in the chat, Rose. You can follow up with me, and then what I will do is connect you with the Minnesota Department of Education. Oh, Emily also just put their website in the chat. That is the best place to connect with for the federal meal program information.
Okay, so I just go ahead and register through them.
Yes, and so there's more information on what all that entails on the website. And then if you want to connect with a staff member at Department of Education, you can send me an email and I can introduce you by email.
Sounds good. Okay, thank you so much. I appreciate this.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Rose.
Okay.
Any other questions? All right. With that, we'll wrap this up. Thank you so much, everyone, and have a great rest of your afternoon.